This is Dr. Kamani, licensed clinical psychologist. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Kamani, licensed clinical psychologist, and we are here for Real Talk about HR. This is part 3. So we're going to learn more about strategizing so that you know if you decide to go to HR, what to do. I know many times when we're in a situation, a toxic environment, we sometimes, at our job, we don't know what to do, right? And many times we're told to go to HR, and we might be a little leery about going to HR because of things we may have heard, right? So we may be concerned, and you may have watched the previous videos and say, I don't know if I want to go to HR, right? So this video is really going to provide you with information about what to do if you decide to go to HR, right? So how do you decide, and then what do you do if you decide to go to HR, okay? So again, I have my very special guests. I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and then we're going to go right to the conversation. But I do want to say, because we are talking about toxic work environments, that for some people, this may be triggering information. So please be mindful of taking care of yourself. If you recognize that you're being triggered, please take care of yourself. Step away or do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. The other thing is that we are not attorneys, right? So we are not giving you legal advice, but we are giving you information from the perspective of HR and also mental health. So with that said, I'll turn it over to my special guest, Charmaine. If you can introduce yourself, then we'll go to Dr. Claire.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for this finale. I'm Charmaine, founder and CEO of Chapter 2 LLC, which is a consultancy service providing advisory, coaching, thought leadership, and training services to leaders and employees who are anchored to inclusion in workplaces.
Thank you. Dr. Claire.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and hello, wherever you are. I am Dr. Claire. I partner on Chapter 2, and Dr. Claire Speaks. And Dr. Claire Speaks is grounded in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and has an overarching focus on health equity. It is a thought leadership, training, and speaking consultancy that is focused on the intersection of mental health, racial and social justice, advocacy, and policy. And we help organizations such as government, nonprofits, and healthcare educational spaces that are producing healthcare providers, but also the organizations that are providing care and service to ensure that it is deeply grounded in health equity and also honoring the value and dignity of each and every single person that comes through their doors.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to get right into it. So if you've been following my channel, you know that my channel focuses on helping to support the healing of Black women from toxic work environments. So we are talking about HR, okay? So we'll start with you, Charmaine. What advice would you give to someone if they're trying to navigate being in a toxic work environment?
So much, there's so much. And I think the first thing I will say, and what we covered a lot of in part 1, which really focused on the fact that this is happening in environments and helping to demystify the role of HR as a function, because it's really misunderstood oftentimes. And then in part 2, where we focus more in on the impact and the health and wellness challenges that occur for people and what also happens performance-wise. I want to first say that we should acknowledge those things, right, that were covered in part 1 and 2. And if you haven't had a chance, please go back and watch them. But the advice is everything we've been saying along. Don't gaslight yourself, right? Recognize that it is happening. There are systems and structures that are in place that have been in place long before any of us were even on this earth that are designed to not be in support of you. So the best advice I could give initially is please don't gaslight yourself, right? Understand that you're in these structures, you're in these systems. It's not you. Organizations, are made up of organisms, people. And as we've said, many times, people are going to disappoint you. People are going to exhibit behaviors, right? So don't gaslight yourself. Know that you are not alone. And there are definitely strategies and tips that we're going to cover today that can help you.
And I'm wondering too, because I think, sometimes people might say go to HR, but we might have second thoughts about that, right?
Absolutely.
How do you go about even deciding to go to HR? How do you even determine that?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Look, I think it's a personal choice, right? And I can certainly understand why people would struggle with going to HR, not only because of what they've experienced and what they've heard, but a lot of the things that we've been discussing in the first two, series, and also just your series in general about Black women and toxic jobs, right? So it's real, the things that are happening that would prevent people from going to HR. But if you are going to do it, it's a personal choice, and I think having your ducks in a row, for lack of better terms, is the best thing I could say. Are you aware of what's happened, when it's happened? Do you have information to support what you're saying? Now, I'm not saying to go over and give that all over to someone, but I do think it's important to understand and recognize, what do you have already, right? If you're saying that you've had this experience, is it because you feel that way, or is it because you can prove that that happened? And the reason I'm saying that, and we covered a lot of in part one, is that it's what you can prove. And I know we talked about keeping receipts and the emotional labor and toll, but unfortunately, you have to keep a record. You have to know what has happened to you. You have to be able to point to it, right? If you go to the doctor and the doctor says to you, how long has this issue been going on? They're going to want you to keep a record, or to have a record. And if you don't have a record, they may send you back and say, start tracking this. So go to HR. If you are going to make the decision to go to HR, again, I think it's personal. I do think that people should be prepared for being asked questions that may make them uncomfortable. HR should not be there to make you feel bad, right? But when we're carrying a lot of emotional trauma and we're dealing with those things, sometimes we approach situations thinking someone is coming at us, and that may not be it. So I would say, if you are going to go to HR, do a self-check. Where are you? What do you need, right? First and foremost, do you have your receipts, right? Your proof points in place, right? And it doesn't mean that you're handing over a piece of paper. But if I say to you, when's the earliest time you remember this happening? Be able to just give some general perspective, time frame. It happened X, Y, and Z. A, B, and C were present. This is what was said. This is what happened. Those are the types of things, because the more empowered you are, and empowerment comes from education because you're informed, I think that makes it a lot easier to go to HR, because you're not just walking in there like, I don't know what's going on. You're walking in to say, this has happened. This is how many times it's happened. This is what I need to do. And please go to HR. Again, I want to respect what everyone has experienced, but when you don't report what has happened and someone else does, they have first player move advantage. And I think that's important to understand. So if that's your manager or another employee, they do that.
Now, a question just came in. I just wanted to address that before I go to you, Dr. Claire. What do you do if you don't have concrete evidence? Oftentimes the behaviors are not outright.
So look, we know, right? And again, not giving legal advice, right? But if what you are experiencing is in the realm of a protected class, and I'm speaking specifically for the US right now, because yes, there are other things that are protected in other countries, but I think most of our audience is in the US, so I'll focus on that. You want to be able to say, these things are happening, and I believe it's because of my disability status, it's because I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community, right? And be able to speak to that, because all racism, all discrimination, all gaslighting isn't overt, right? And I think really what the law is talking about is being able to point to a demonstrated pattern, right? So someone yelling at you, and I know sometimes we work with awful people, awful leaders, awful colleagues, right? Them being mean does not rise to the level of discrimination based on the legal definition in this country. However, if you believe that you're being treated differently or being spoken to in a way that is a result of the protected class that you're in, and quite frankly, the only people in this country who are not in protected classes are white males under 40 who don't have a disability and are not in another class, right? So everybody pretty much is. So if you are saying, I believe because I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community, these comments are being made to me, or the way that employees are engaging with me and my colleagues is a result of that, because other people who are not in this community are not being treated this way, that's enough for you to at least start taking notes.
Yeah, yeah. So just again, just take notes, right? So
Mhm.
even if nobody else can confirm it, you take notes about what
Mhm.
happened and the
Mhm.
impact on you, right? And
Mhm.
particularly talk about the pattern of behavior. So I think that was
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
good in pointing that out.
Mhm.
So Dr. Claire, what about for you? What have you or what advice would you give to people navigating a toxic work environment?
Thank you so much. I certainly want to echo what Shar has said. And I want to add that this is also not constitution as mental health advice, because I know that because we're mental health providers, Dr. K and I, does not mean we're your provider. And so we want to
Yeah.
be clear, this is general information, and it's certainly not formal HR advice, just as it's not formal legal advice. I will say that, similar to what Shar said, and what we've talked about over the last two sessions is, one, acknowledging that what you're feeling, what you're experiencing is real. I think one of the major things that happens often in any situation, whether it's at work or not, is that people often discredit, dismiss, or diminish. And when you
Mm,
diminish what you're experiencing, that's where the gaslighting comes in a lot of the times. And whether it's your colleagues gaslighting you, a spouse, a loved one, yourself, being able to minimize or diminish your experience is part of the reason why we start to doubt. But that can also cause us to ruminate, or for lack of, for a different way of saying rumination would be that broken record, being stuck at that place. And that causes a lot of distress and dis-ease in your mind and your body and your soul and your spirit. It causes dis-ease in your relationships and your interactions with your colleagues, with your loved ones, with your family members, with yourself. And so it is important that you acknowledge what's happening. Also, we do talk about receipts, and recognizing that receipts do not necessarily have to be this well articulated timestamp 1045 to 1057 on January 1st, 2023. Receipts are your diary.
yeah.
Receipts are you blogging about your experiences, right?
Yeah.
And time stamping it, or vlogging or whatever it is. Receipts
Mm,
are you sending emails to yourself, or, a note log that you keep on your phone or on your iPad, or written down, handwriting, of
mm-hmm.
essentially a journal of what you are experiencing, what happened, what date, even you indicating that you're fearful of reporting it to HR, fearful of reporting it to your managers because of your concerns
Retaliation.
about retaliation, because of the way you're spoken to. You can jot those things down in a half of a paragraph for yourself, just
Mm-hmm.
as a cathartic release. And that
Yeah.
can be the basis of your receipt book, essentially. So
Mm-hmm.
I do caution, because I know we've had questions about receipts over the last two times. And again, to the point made, reliving the trauma is extremely, extremely traumatic and triggering. Your
Yeah.
mind and your body do not separate the fact that this happened
Mm-hmm.
12 days ago, 12 months ago, 12 years ago. Your
Mm-hmm.
amygdala is your emotional control center of your brain. It's a very small thing in your brain, but I promise you, it takes over your whole body.
Mm-hmm.
That aspect can literally make you feel as though you are reliving it right then and there.
Yeah.
If you are navigating those harmful places, beyond acknowledging, is looking to see where you have some resources, internal and external to your organization. Something
Mm-hmm.
that is often brought up and can be a helpful resource is EAP. However, as discussed in the first session, EAP is connected to your job, and you may not necessarily feel comfortable.
Mhm.
One of the things that Shar shared with us in the first session was that some EAP companies may have agreements with the workplace that may provide or may share information that you may not think they may share. So it's
Wow.
important to understand the structure of your
Yeah.
EAP, but also acknowledge that
Mhm.
you do not have to use your
Mhm.
company's EAP. If you are
Mm,
privileged to have healthcare insurance, because it is a privilege, unfortunately, it should be a right in this country, and it is not. You
mm-hmm.
may be able to call the back of your insurance company and ask for a list of resources. There are a plethora
Mm,
of resources available, but making sure that you are, building your support network is really important.
Mhm.
The third thing I will say to you is, be mindful of who you talk to and what
Yes.
you share within
yeah.
the organization.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes we build these relationships with people,
Mhm.
and you can have great relationships. Shara and I spoke about it, and she was practical when she also said in all her career, maybe not even 5 people that have become lifelong friends, because
Mhm.
your workplace is not your family, it's not your friend
Right.
circle. But
Right.
also recognizing it's so important to be careful of what you're saying, who you're saying it to,
Mhm.
when you are saying it.
Mhm.
Let's be real. Gossip is juicy regardless.
Yes. Yes.
And people are going to be people. And
Mhm.
being able to run tell that or be the holder of all the tea is what some
Mhm.
people like to do. Being
Yeah.
mindful, if somebody is coming to you, sharing with you about somebody else's experience that they talked to them about, be guaranteed that they are also sharing what you have shared with them, with other
Right.
people. And you
Right.
want to make sure that this is a game of chess. You do not want to you don't want to put your queen in jeopardy. And a lot of times, because of the trauma, and it is a normal human response to share, I want to be clear with that. I'm not
Mhm.
saying to you that you sharing means you're a bad person. Oftentimes, when we are dealing with so much stress, when we are so bogged down, when we are overwhelmed, when we are being abused in these places, you have, as I call it, verbal vomit. Sometimes you just want to get it out. But
Mhm.
being mindful that sometimes you just getting it out, or you might say, I'm going to sue this company. Well, guess what? They overheard you, or somebody that's trying to get an in overheard you. Now
Mhm.
they're going to tell, and now you're on a
Mhm.
pip, and now you're out,
Right.
and now you're out of the role, and
Right.
have the brain space. Oftentimes people do not see it coming
Mhm.
because they are so bogged down into the hurt that they're not able to see what is happening around them. And that,
Yeah.
again, not blaming, because we are human. We are
Yeah.
fallible. We are
Yeah.
subject to the dis-ease, the stress, the strain, the mental strain that happens, the emotional strain that happens is real. It can cause
Mhm.
physical symptoms, psychological symptoms, emotional symptoms, relational symptoms, and work performance symptoms
Yeah,
that
Yeah.
devastating.
absolutely, absolutely.
Those
Yeah.
are 3
Yeah.
things I can say
Yeah,
that we should, definitely be mindful of,
yeah,
as you navigate the toxic work experience and environment.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. I just
One
wanted
thing,
to ask
Dr. P,
you.
before you,
Uh-huh.
another way for, the record keeping voice notes. You can keep voice notes on your phone, right? They have
Mm.
timestamps of everything, right? Again, this is
Mhm.
just your way of doing things, and that could be your
Mhm.
cathartic release. And I
Yeah.
just want to clarify something you said, Claire. EAP, right, is a resource I would tell people not to use if you're complaining about your employer. And it's not necessarily because they are going to be like Jane Doe did X. What I was
Uh-huh.
speaking about more specifically last time was dependent on the type of benefits plan that
Uh-huh.
the company has, right? Because some of those benefit plans, the arrangements is that if the employer wants specifics about an individual, they could get that to be that is the stuff that can be shared. But I would say, because Dr. K had brought this up and I wanted to be clear on this, in terms of the help, a lot of government resources are available, right? City, local, state, federal resources offer free services for employment law or just workplace issues or challenges. In New York, I know 311 is a number to call, but there are many resources that people can look into. Google or any internet browser you like,
Mhm.
what free resources for workplace advice, right? Free city resources or whatever that is. That's another really good way to get some information. And also, some lawyers do free consults.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to just say something
Yeah.
too, just as a reminder. I know we've talked about this in the previous
Mhm.
episodes, but just as a reminder to the audience that when you document,
Yeah.
do not document at your job on job equipment,
Please don't.
right?
Please don't.
Document somewhere else. The second thing was, and Dr. Claire, you mentioned this in terms of, and I think we all talked about this
Yeah.
before, be very mindful of who you talk to at
Yes.
work, right? In terms
Mhm.
of what business you share
Mhm.
for whatever reasons, right? Because what I've experienced, what I've heard other people
Mhm.
talk about, my clients, is the betrayal, right?
Absolutely.
The feeling of betrayal that when you open up to people that you thought,
Mhm.
you could trust, and then they turn on you, whatever. So let's just minimize that. Do not tell them your business.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then the third thing is retaliation, because that's so real, right?
Mhm.
So, a few things, sure. So,
Yeah.
when we think about if somebody decides to go to HR,
Yeah.
what is normal, or what is the protocol in terms of what they should
Yep.
expect, and
Absolutely.
how do they know like when it's going left?
Yeah, yeah. Well, one, if you feel like you're being gaslit, it's going left, right? But I will also
Okay.
say that when we are experiencing high levels of stress or high levels of emotional feelings, right?
Mhm,
It may
mhm,
cloud the way we are able to view a situation, right? So I
mhm.
want to just acknowledge that. Specific
Yeah.
to HR, every organization is different and every HR person is different. So it's hard to say this is what will happen all the time. What I want you to expect is that
Mhm,
someone is being fair and impartial, right? If someone starts saying things to you like, Johnny would never do something like that. I've never had that. We've never had a complaint about blah. Or,
mhm,
you know, real example, and on our website we have a insights page that we call Gems and Gemisos, and I posted something last month about a real experience. We have a series that we call Leadership Fail Statements, where we examine real statements that people that we know have sent into us that leaders have said. And in one of those statements, which was featured last month, so you can go back and read it, an employee was told by a leader, I'm really disappointed that X did this, but firing them is not an option. So if those are the types of things that you hear from a
mm,
leader or HR or anyone that you're
mhm,
reporting it to, because I want to also let people know you don't always have to report something to HR.
mm,
If you report something to your manager, if you
mhm,
report something to someone else in a leadership capacity at the organization, they have a
mhm,
duty to act.
mm,
So if you think that you're just going to your manager venting about things that rise to the level of discrimination,
mm,
please do not be upset if you now get a follow-up from HR, right? So I think it's about level setting expectations, right? Because
mhm,
legally mandated reporters, and again, not provided legal advice, but things have to be reported. So
mhm,
if you say something to HR or someone who's in leadership capacity that
mhm,
rises to the level of workplace issue, alarm, an investigation should be launched. And what an
mhm,
investigation means is that they are going to start asking questions, asking about data to support, and whatever format that data is in, to support the claim that you are making, right? So
mhm,
what you
mhm,
should expect is that someone is going to take an exploratory approach with you,
mm,
that they're going to seek to understand what the impact to you is, that they're
mhm,
going to ask you about what remedial steps may make the situation better in your view. Now, to
mm,
be clear, you may not always know what that is, right? Because if I'm
mm.
upset or stressed and someone is saying, what do you need? I don't know what I need. I just need to get through this moment right now. But again,
Yeah,
that's part of their process. So don't get upset
yeah,
if someone says that, because
yeah.
if someone's following, and for HR people on this call,
Mm,
please make sure that you're doing this, honoring what the person has said, asking for details. We should be asking them, even if
mm,
they don't have an answer,
mm,
what their expectations are of the process. We should be explaining to them what steps we're going to be taking after the
mhm,
conversation with them, to
mhm,
include whether or not they would be contacted by other people, whether that's somebody else in
mm,
HR. The worst thing
mhm,
we can do as HR professionals, and I'm speaking specifically to HR people right now, is to have someone come to us, confide something that's traumatic to them, and then somebody else that they did not speak to now send them a message or put a meeting on their calendar to have a conversation. Whoa, who are you? Please don't do
right.
that.
Yeah.
Please explain what the process is going to be at your organization.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I had a situation, there have been many, but I had a situation where I had to suspend someone in a leadership position for some behavior based on things that they did.
Mm,
And I went to the employee and said, this
mhm,
person is suspended because they said, I'm not comfortable. And while
mhm,
I typically in HR cannot go back and say, we did A, B, and C, D, because
mm,
the employee wasn't, the leader wasn't going to be in the office, I went to that person and said, hi, thank you for reporting this. Just so
mhm,
you are aware, the
mhm,
step that has been taken is that X is not allowed on site right now. And
mm.
until we get through this, we'll not be here. Now, I did
Okay.
not tell the employee why we did it, no, I
Right.
just let them know, because for them, it was a safety thing, that
Mm,
concern was removed from them. Imagine if I didn't say that to that person. How might that have
mhm.
impacted their performance if they kept showing up to work, or they were afraid to come to work because they didn't know
Hypervigilance. The
exactly.
hypervigilance. Yeah.
So you should expect for HR to explain what the process is at that company, to provide you
Mhm,
with timelines and
mhm,
expected timelines for when they should follow up with you. And you should ask them any questions that you need to know in that moment, and
Yeah.
also what the best way to contact them or communicate with them post if anything else comes up happens.
Yeah.
If they're
Yeah.
like, I don't know, X them. Nope, next, on to the next.
Okay. See, that's good information for us to know. I think it's important for people to be informed about what to expect and when it's a sign that this is not going well, right? Now, Dr. Claire, I know for you and for me, you know, I've encountered just in terms of my own professional experiences and then with clients having very traumatic experiences, not only just in the workplace, but through HR, right? So
Absolutely.
that I've heard has been retaliation,
Yes.
right? And just feeling like a total betrayal. So, what would you say to someone, a Black woman who's watching this right now, and she's leery about going to HR, right? So, even if she kind of knows what to expect, you know, maybe she's heard from other colleagues about the retaliation. So, that's one part. But let's say that she does go. Let's say she moves through, she does go, and she is retaliated against. What words of wisdom would you give to her?
First, I would say, sis, trust your gut. Not going to lead you wrong.
Yeah.
You have to be able to know that what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what you're fearful of, sometimes is based in reality, right? Like
Yeah.
the hesitation of going to HR, not just because of what we've heard, but maybe because of what we've experienced, is a natural response, right? Avoidance is an ego defense. It's one of the healthier ego defense mechanisms, right?
Yes.
And so it's, well, I'm going to avoid this thing that may be harmful, may cause me pain. So acknowledge it and trust your gut. One of the things I wanted to comment on before I continue here, though, is acknowledging that retaliation is real. Often companies have the statement, the go-to, we don't tolerate retaliation of any sort. Just like America says, there's no place for hate in America, and yet America is hate-filled. So let us just be clear that retaliation is real.
Yes.
It is, as Charmaine mentioned the last time we got together, the number one leading cause for EEOC violations being founded is retaliation. Because and if retaliation were not real and tolerated in all these organizations, the EEOC would not be able to sanction people for and companies for retaliation. So acknowledging that and backing it up with facts is important.
Yeah, and just EEOC for everyone is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and it's the arm of the federal government that oversees workplace, policies related to employees, from candidates to employees in terms of discrimination. So just want to put that. And Claire is right. And I believe that, and by the way, the EEOC.gov, they post their stats. So, and for the US, retaliation, I think 10 years plus has been the number one most processed claim that they have had, which means that claims that they pick up. So anyone can file a complaint with the EEOC, right? Then they're going to decide what they're going to help with. But the number one claim, the larger bucket, is retaliation. So it's real.
Yeah.
And when companies tell you that they don't tolerate retaliation, it's don't sit there and tell yourself, well, you're wrong for believing that there may be retaliation. Because as we've been saying, people are the company. A company is not some inanimate object. It is an organization is made up of organisms. Something Charmaine mentioned that I wanted to speak to briefly, and then I'll get into some of the things that people can also do, particularly in a heightened emotional state, is that recognizing if your HR or the people, your managers, are presenting with bias, that is something for you to also note. I can speak from personal experience, having reported an issue to HR and to leaders, and essentially not being told what the process would be. We just have to investigate. Weeks go by, not really knowing. Then there's a meeting on your calendar. Oh, can we meet? And, it's been a month, and now they're giving you 2 days notice of a meeting. And then being told essentially that because someone who provided written documentation of their experience of what happened to me was someone that my manager didn't like, that they dismissed that person's recording of what happened. And I will say that recording was unprompted. The person was so taken aback by how I was treated in a meeting and how I was disrespected that they sent me an email like very early the next morning, and they were so concerned. And I shared that But because my leadership team didn't like the person, they completely dismissed it. And so
Wow.
to call that out, and I said, well, that's not. And so for me, it was evident I was not going to have an equitable space. And then
Yeah.
because the person who I experienced harm with is someone who said that they felt because I was Black that they wouldn't have any room for, defending themselves. I was asked to be understanding of that instead of the fact that I was harmed. So now it was, well, this person said that, they're uncomfortable and they don't have any place to say because you're Black, so they're not going to win.
Mhm.
So now it was essentially,
Yeah.
Wow.
You
Now,
can't,
that's not a major mind F, right?
Yeah.
You're
right.
being harmed and you're told to protect the other person. Oh my
But
God.
Dr. Kamani, I will say that, and you've talked about this on a lot of your other videos, and for all of you on this channel, please go back and watch. It's
Watch
like
it.
life-giving, the stuff that Dr. K has been covering specific to toxic work environments and Black women. But this
I
is
didn't pay her, guys.
no, you really didn't. But I've been going down the rabbit hole of the videos, and they're
And I
fantastic.
will second that. They're
So,
really good.
Thank you.
It's important to recognize that we, Black women, other people of color, other marginalized groups, are conditioned in a system that wants us to say that we are wrong or to feel less than or to minimize our experiences for the comfort of another.
Yes.
So it is not.
Yes.
It is
For the
not
comfort of the oppressor. I want
right,
to be
right.
that.
So it's not surprising, right? Because
Mhm.
even in that example that I gave you relating to the essay that's on our website, the Gemisode,
Mhm.
the employee, who, by the way, isn't HR themselves, right? And had this experience with another leader at the company, they were told, well, the person is uncomfortable that you're uncomfortable, right? They were asked, well, what would you like me to do? What do you think is the best thing to do? So not only were they being asked and expected to center the trauma of the person who caused them trauma,
Right. Crazy.
it was then made clear to them that termination of the person who caused the trauma, who, by the way, had said wildly offensive and inappropriate things about several, marginalized groups, and it wasn't the first time, was not an option. So when you think about what someone is experiencing, right? And so for the leaders on this call and who are managing teams, people who are employees who will become leaders for HR, we have to think about the trauma and the further impact we are causing when we're asking someone else to hold space for their oppressor.
Yep.
Woo. Yes.
Absolutely.
That's deep. That's
and
deep.
that is a function of white supremacy culture, right?
Absolutely.
To be very clear about it.
Absolutely.
We have been told as Black women and as indigenous people and people of the global majority that we have to make sure our oppressors are comfortable. And it goes back to that. It is how we survive, avoiding the white gaze, avoiding the white fury, and it's lessening ourselves and invalidating our experiences so that they are comfortable. And it continues. It is a function of supremacy culture, and it's a function of a cycle of violence that is constantly inflicted upon the global majority. And so to the point that Shar is making about that scenario, that was someone in HR who knows probably more so than others that this was problematic, but the leadership of the company was basically saying, we know that this person is problematic and pretty much violating federal laws, but we are going to keep them. You have to do it. And in my case as well, it was Charmaine said something that, activated me, that I too was told I needed to figure out how to address the situation and move forward. I too was told that because another person of color was in the meeting and they didn't feel it was that bad, that they were disappointed in me for bringing it up. And I was like, I don't care that so one Black woman being upset about me naming harm does not mean that I didn't experience harm. But I want to say, because of the experience of being told, I needed to figure out how to navigate it. And I needed to present something as well as comfort a person who in the meeting, I kept saying I'm being harmed, did nothing. Nothing was done. Nothing happened because I understood the meeting to be, we did our pseudo investigation. We're not comfortable. And now that these other people don't think that they harmed you, You have to figure out how to make them comfortable while you figure out how to for them to make amends to you. And so what I said was, that is not worth my emotional labor, because now I'm being abused and gaslit and dismissed by HR, which goes back to Charmaine's point of, when you are feeling and experiencing that HR is not able to be non-judgmental, that HR is unable to maintain a position of neutrality, then that is not the place that you go.
Absolutely,
for
absolutely,
help and
absolutely.
support, because it is not a system of help. It is a system that will further harm, and is a system that is there to uphold and maintain a culture of harm, supremacy, and oppression. And that is not the space for you. And so maybe that's where the outside resources might come in, such as the stuff that Char mentioned, maybe free legal resources, or maybe going and filing a claim with the EEOC or whatever that is, if you believe that you are experiencing this and you have documentation to support it. And
Claire, one thing I want to add, because I know this session is really about strategizing to win, right? How to engage HR effectively, right? So I think it's important for people to know that in the US, right? Again, speaking of the US, and it works like this in a lot of other countries too, just so you know, you don't have to go to HR first if there's a problem. Absolutely. So if you felt, you know what, I'm not going to get anywhere with the company, not whether or not you've had a positive or negative experience with HR, right? Because sometimes we just don't even want to try, right? Let's acknowledge that sometimes we don't want to try the things. It may not even be because we've had a bad experience. We just may be in our heads and don't want to try. These city, government, and state agencies don't require that you first speak to your company. They don't. So please don't feel as though you don't have another outlet, because you absolutely do. But if you choose to engage HR, right? I think of this more in terms of the before HR and going to HR, right? So what's your prep, and then what's your process, right? So if you're going to go to HR, a lot of the things that we talked about in the first and second, sessions really covered what you should expect. It really talked about demystifying HR and all of those things. But if you are having thoughts about going to HR, first get clear about what your expectations are. So before you go to HR, be clear about what you expect, because again, uncommunicated expectations it's always going to lead to disappointment, right? It's a learning process for you, right? But make sure that you understand what you want and expect. If you are observing behaviors, because going to HR doesn't have to be about you, right? The law also says that you can report something that you are seeing, right? So in New York, the MTA, which is our transit system, says if you see something, say something, right? It's the same thing. So if you see something that is making you uncomfortable, or workplace behaviors that you are observing somebody else experience, you can report those too, right? You absolutely can. But make sure that you are clear. So before HR, be clear about what your expectations are. Make sure that you have your notes in a whatever format, or at least an understanding of what examples you are referencing about the situation, and empower yourself through education. Do some light research, right? What are your employee rights and laws that are applicable to your location, right? There's state laws, federal laws, city laws, right? It's a URL search, browser search, right? Whatever browser you want, just search, what are my employee rights, right? Things like whether or not you have access to your employee file. That's something that people don't always know, and not every state says yes. So whatever you're thinking about, what do I want to know? Just have that information, because being empowered through education is going to help you go into any conversation you decide to have a lot more confident. It doesn't mean that you're going to tell them, and I know this and that, but think about it, right? If you study for an exam, or you have an awareness about it, you may feel more confident going into it, right? For me, I still had anxiety no matter how much I studied, but I definitely felt, okay, if this comes up, I know this, right? And don't ignore the biggest thing I could say before going to HR is, and there's so many big things, right? But the biggest of the biggest, don't ignore what's happening, hoping that it's automatically going to go away. Your silence is not going to fix it. There have been so many times where I've had employees, when I've said, did you share this before? Well, I thought if I didn't say anything, it would go away, or I didn't want to get in trouble. I don't know what this trouble is, right? I know when, my goddaughter when she would get in trouble when she was younger. I know what that meant, right? But we're an adult, and we have to get rid of this notion of trouble. But if you think you're going to be in trouble, I tell people, name it to tame it. Define what that means for you, right? So make sure that you are clear about your expectations to HR before you go to HR. Be able to communicate what those expectations are first to yourself. Make sure that you're clear on what you've observed. Empower yourself through education, and don't ignore what's happening. And when I say don't ignore, don't wait, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem, the waiting.
Yeah.
I'm not huge on video games. I used to play them when I was younger, but first person move advantage, right? Like, think about that, right? And then if you decide to go to HR, because this has happened a lot of times, be clear on what the specific issue or concern that you're reporting is. Make it easy for HR, right? Don't say, I don't like the way they're talking to me. If you believe that someone's talking to you negatively because you are a part of the Latinx community, and then you say, I believe as a Latinx person that I'm being spoken to this way. And here's why. Give the specifics if you're going to HR. Put things in writing. I tell people all the time, I don't care if I spoke to HR. Do not make the assumption, oh, I've spoken and that's it. Send a recap email to the HR person. Dear Jane, John, whoever, thank you for meeting. To recap, we discussed boom, boom, boom. That's your point, right?
Yes.
Right? I know that people are thinking, well, HR is only the best interest of the company. Again, we're employees too. We're trying to balance the situation and are also navigating the environment, right? HR, and I've had employees do this to me. They want me to co-sign on the company is awful. I'm not going to do that. Like, I hear you. Inside, I can say it. I mean, think it, but I'm never going to communicate that to you, right?
Right.
Because that does not show impartiality. So it's important that if you once you make the decision to go to HR, that you are clear about what it is you are saying, that you provided an examples, help them paint the picture, that you are putting in writing, whether that's recapping the discussion where you are outlining the concerns again, that you are understanding that objectivity is what HR is supposed to maintain, and that you then ask them to set expectations with you about what the investigation process needs to look like.
Can I ask you something, Char?
Absolutely.
Like, how would you even know to go to HR? You know what I'm saying? Like, what types of issues
Absolutely.
would you say are good issues to go to HR about? Right. So you said, like, if you say something, but what rises to the occasion that you'll be like, oh, maybe go to HR?
So, it's anything that you feel that if you feel that you're being treated differently because of a characteristic about yourself, right? So if someone said, I think that I am not getting opportunities for advancement because I have a learning disability that my team's aware of, right? That type of thing, right? Under ADA, that would be protected. If someone says, because I am Black or because I am a woman, these are the experiences I'm having. I am, if I go into, perfect example, I'm in a room with male employees or male identified employees. I am often ignored or passed over when it comes to offering a perspective. And I sit in there, I'm not getting the assignments. If those things are happening, right? I don't think there's every single thing, right? Because we're not therapists. Dr. Claire and Dr. Kamani are, so that's where you go, people. But if something is happening and you believe it's a result of a characteristic about yourself, I would say that's the first thing. Now, the toxic work environment, right? Because there's hostile, which rises to the legal definition of something that's a protected characteristic, and toxic is just bad, right? Somebody could just be mean, and that doesn't mean that what they've done is discriminatory. I would still report that, though. If someone is speaking to you in a way that doesn't feel honoring, you can say something. Now, I encourage people, if they're comfortable, to first have a conversation with that person, right? If it's something that is, you don't like the tone someone's taking with you, right? If you believe that tone is a result of a protected class because you're a woman, and that's triggering for you, don't do it. But I think sometimes we all have to be adults where we can, and just say, if you yelled at me, for example, and that's not our relationship. I'm not going to HR for that. I might say, hey, Dr. K, I don't know what happened today, but the way that you spoke to me, it didn't land right. Is everything okay between us, right?
Mhm.
That for me is where I'd start, depending on that relationship, if I'm comfortable, right? But if you had said to me, I don't like you because you're Black and that harmful, I'm not trying to have that conversation. But I think we have
Yeah.
to be able to differentiate what is the thing that I think is happening or believe is happening as a result of being Black, woman, Latinx, LGBTQ plus, disabled, because of my religion. What are those things versus someone said something that I just didn't like their tone in the way they spoke to me. I think we have to differentiate between those two.
Yeah. And I think it's important too. I think that there are sometimes situations where someone is disrespectful towards you and you can talk to that person.
Yeah.
I know for my situation, this person was a tyrant, right? So, history of retaliation, so nobody wanted to talk to this person.
And
because
that's
they had seen it
understandable.
happen. Yes. So just to the audience, be mindful of the person that you're talking to. Might they be receptive to the feedback, right? So I think it's good if the person's receptive that you're able to have that dialogue. I also want to say one more thing too. When you talked about when people say, "Oh, don't go to HR, you're going to go and get in trouble." Like to me, that's always a disturbing sign, right?
Yes.
Like any work environment where you feel like you're being in trouble. Like, I just feel like that is so demeaning because we're all adults working, right? And so just because somebody is in a so-called position, that doesn't mean they have power over you. That doesn't mean that you're a child, you have no voice, right? So already right there, that's problematic.
But I think the trouble, Dr. K, comes from the misconception about HR.
Right. But I will also add, though, I think that in talking to people, trouble typically means an impact to their job or potentially retaliation. If I report this, I am going to get in trouble. Typically means for people, I may lose my job, my livelihood, my stability. And yes, it may be a part of a misunderstanding about HR. And at the same time, we don't typically have, while there are stereotypes and we have to acknowledge those, there are the people who, because of what they've witnessed, what they've experienced, the culture of the organization lends them to this belief or this gut reaction that it is not safe. I'm getting in trouble says I don't feel safe. This culture isn't safe. And that connects to the emotional and the mental health pieces around how people may or may not show up in the workplace, as well as the additional dis-ease that happens, right? Charmaine mentioned some stuff that I really want to also tie in really quickly to the mental health piece. Because this is such so activating and can be so distressing, it is important actually for you to write down maybe step 1 through 5 things that you want to talk about. As Charmaine said, get real with yourself first. So what are the expectations? And then follow up by making sure that you are clear in your communication to HR as best as you can be. Now, that may be that you tell a loved one, hey, I'm having this issue. Can you just listen to me explain this? Does it make sense to you? Am I rambling? I have these 5 bullet points that I want to talk about. Does this make sense? And do these quick examples I give make sense? Because that person may say, look, if you're going to talk to HR, you've experienced this for 2 years. You can't dump 2 years in a 20-minute conversation. So this 5-page example for example number 1 might need to really cut to 5 lines, right? And maybe as you go on, also that helps you with not over activating your emotional control center, your amygdala, and not being in a space where you're not able to think. Because when we're under stress, we're not able to effectively communicate. So that tool that Charmaine said and how to engage HR for yourself is actually a tool that can help with how you navigate your own emotional and mental response of distress. Because by having those bullet points, it helps you to focus. It helps to provide you an ability to have a point of reference should you start losing your train of thought because you're reliving that experience. And it's something that you may provide in writing to HR. Here's the agenda that I would like to discuss. Or as a follow-up, as Charmaine mentioned, as you recap that conversation, here's what I understood and took away from this conversation. And please see attached the 5 examples and areas I discussed with you. That way you have record of it, because one of the things, even as and I can use the clinical stuff that Dr. K and I go through, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And experiences, and I've heard from people in the spaces that I'm in that they have gone to HR and expressed concerns, and then weeks later HR is like, oh, you never met with me. It wasn't written down, and so it never happened. And that's not necessarily. Again, Charmaine has been very clear, and we're clear too. This is not anti-HR, but this is very clear that HR is human beings. Yeah. And not every person in a role necessarily is resourced to do their role, skilled to do their role, or or maybe they're just like, I don't want to deal with this, and they're not bias free, because we are individuals with our own lived experiences, and that can color and shape the way we view, receive, and interact with other people. But making sure that you have that stuff documented, and those quick bullet points can truly help center you. Another thing that you can do, because again, we've talked about the stomach aches, we've talked about the headaches, we've talked about the lack of sleep, we've talked about the anxiety, we've talked about depression, and depression is one of the leading causes of disability in the world. And in the workplace, it costs over $51 trillion $1 billion in loss of and absenteeism. Absenteeism is a sign, of something going on, and may not necessarily be because it's a bad boss. It may be that the toxicity and the work demands are so high and unrealistic that even if you have a supportive boss or a supported leader or colleague, whatever you want to say, that it's not enough to buffer the reality of the culture of that organization. And so it's important that you are able to document what you're experiencing. And the last thing I will say is go to your health care provider. Absolutely. There's another place of documenting what's happening to you. Those notes. Are the health implications that are happening, right? When your doctor is like, this is not okay, like we are noticing this and this, that is another place of documentation. And it may be something that can help you if you need to go on FMLA, if you need to take a leave of absence, which is FMLA here. I just wanted to clarify, because Charmaine shared me to make sure I explain what things are meaning. That may be something that helps you, but being able to clearly articulate for yourself what is happening, your physical and emotional reactions, as well as those key examples that you want to share, and then following up, can be something that helps you titrate how you are regulating emotionally. And lastly, I will say there are techniques that you can use to help regulate yourself. Cycle breathing, grounding techniques. Sometimes people squeeze a stress ball. This fidget spinners, even though fidget spinners probably annoyed a whole bunch of teachers, they're actually things that can help regulate your anxiety. Squeezing that ball, going for a walk, stretching, whatever those things are. And there's some of these are things that you can do without people noticing. Breathing is something that, if we are privileged to have the gift of life, that we are doing normally, no one can tell that you're holding your breath and letting it out. And that actually forces you to put oxygen. When you sigh, automatically after I sighed, I had to breathe in oxygen. And so sighing and expressing that can also be healthy, because when you're breathing in oxygen, you're flooding your brain and your body with that oxygen, which is going to help regulate how you're feeling and experiencing stuff. And that's another strategy that you can use in how you prepare and navigate for HR. Now we want to go on to speaking specifically about chapter 2 as we wrap up. I do
want to say something in terms of, when we think about doing the bullet points, right? The bullet points is helpful too, because when we think about, as mental health professionals, people who go through this experience many times in a toxic work environment is traumatic, right? So it's a form of trauma. So we know that with trauma treatment, we talk about structure, right? So having a degree of structure is very helpful, because it helps people have a sense of control over a situation that feels very uncontrollable, right? So that's the one thing. The second thing I wanted to say was, many times, and I know the clients that I've worked with, have talked about the retaliation, all these different
Yeah.
things. I think it's important. I think that I heard you guys talk about this too, that HR doesn't have to, you can choose to get an HR or not, right?
Right.
We're trying to give you the tools in terms of deciding
Mhm,
when or how to
mhm,
engage,
mhm,
but you have other options, right?
mhm,
So, like if you feel like HR is complicit with the
mhm,
retaliation, do not go to HR, right? There's
mhm,
other options for you.
mhm.
And I know I've had a lot of Black women talk to me about seeking legal action, right? So there's other options for you. I just don't want people who are listening to this
Mm.
to feel like they're in a toxic job, they're stuck, and there's nothing they
Absolutely
can
not
do about
stuck.
it, right?
Absolutely not stuck. There are options. And by the way, an option is leaving. And I know
Yes,
that
yes,
and we said it last time, if someone is not showing that they're deserving of your presence, then give them your absence, right? Like I think it's
absolutely.
important to recognize that leaving is a real thing.
Yes,
Sometimes we want to
absolutely.
sit there and figure it out.
Yes,
Sometimes figure it out is leaving. And I
yes,
think that has to be an option on the table. Again, I know
yes,
we're talking about HR and strategies, but really, again, HR people. So the
yes,
best strategies, whether it's HR or for yourself, is to make sure that you understand what's going on, what you are looking for as an outcome, and that you're clear on that, right? Not
yeah,
everything I've had employees come to me and say, I'm being discriminated against, right? Do an investigation, get more information from them, and really find out, no, they're just dealing with a jerk, but nothing
yeah,
that jerk has done rises to the discrimination level, right? Now, that
yeah,
person, that employee may still feel like, well, HR didn't do anything. I
yeah,
did. It may not have been the outcome you wanted, but
yeah,
something was done, right? So again,
yeah.
this is why I go back to the expectations. And I
Hmm.
think that's really important. And look, for people who are leaders on this call or will become leaders, the important thing to remember is, especially about these toxic work environments, is even if you're not even motivated to create more equitable spaces for people, and I believe you should be, understand that these issues have
Hmm.
real business impact.
Hmm.
There's so many studies, Gallup, Glint, McKinsey, Deloitte, so many that have been done. And this has been being studied for decades, right? But disengaged employees, and disengagement can come from the way that you're being treated, right? I don't feel like I belong here.
Hmm.
I can't really engage, and I'm not being treated. It costs $7.8 trillion a
Right.
year in
You're
lost
not getting the
production.
best out of your employees.
That you're right. That trillion with a T, that's globally, right?
Right.
So when you think about that, like that's just in lost productivity. So
Hmm.
companies and for leaders on the call, for the organization, you are losing money. And that's where
Yeah.
chapter 2 can also really help you. We can help
Hmm.
you align your strategies, your people processes, and which should shape and inform your business processes to
Hmm.
help you get this right, or at least
Yeah.
better. Because
Yeah.
unfortunately, whether or not you like it, you are losing money, right? When Claire mentioned depression, and I looked this up recently. It's depression alone, right? So just depression, not even other mental health, depression, $44 billion in lost productivity in the US a
Wow.
year.
Yep.
Wow.
And
So
T
we're
Pills
talking
for
about
55
B's,
billion.
we're talking about B's and T's
Mm.
in terms
A lot
of
of money.
money that is lost, right?
Yes.
And the thing is that for HR, we have to do a better job at pushing things sometimes. And I know we don't always make the decisions, but
Yeah.
the reality is that job seekers, especially if we're thinking about the workforce right now, right? Millennials and Gen Z are going to, by 2025, that's going to be the majority, right? Over 80% of them want diverse workforces.
Mm.
So if you're really thinking about how do I answer the call of what is expected of me, you have to
Hmm.
think about the impacts that are happening, right?
Yeah.
That diverse companies, and there's a difference between diversity and inclusion, right? Diverse is, okay, I've had some oranges, I threw some apples in here, right? For me,
Mhm.
inclusion is what steps were taken to make sure that oxidation is not happening and damaging one of those fruits because of exposure to each other, right? That's how I like to
Yes.
explain it, right?
Yes.
But when we think about this, we should be thinking about how are we integrating our processes and systems and people to
Mm.
create these environments that are healthier,
Yeah.
because toxic environments for anyone does not bode well for company profitability. It doesn't
Yeah.
bode well for innovation, and it certainly doesn't bode well for your brand reputation or your recruitment efforts, right? A
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
companies waste money saying, I can't get X person. Well, it's going to cost you 1.5 to 1.7 times the cost of the person that you lost. And a lot of the things, I read a report recently that said, when it comes to inclusion, a lot of the money lost and companies are missing out in terms of innovation, profitability. All of these things that are lost are things that are preventable because of the way people are being treated.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad you said that, Charmaine. And I
Absolutely.
know we're going to
Yes,
wind
of
down in a
course.
minute. But I just wanted to say this because I know I've said this on different videos.
Mhm.
Just many times the system is toxic, right? So
Yes.
many times, particularly like with workplace bullies, the
Yes.
system knows that these are bullies,
Yeah.
right? Because they don't just target one, they have a history of being a bully. However, they're never checked. And so the
Right.
message that it sends to the employees is, uh-oh, I'm going to be in trouble if I say something, right? That
Mhm.
fear and that intimidation is a controlling, an oppressive strategy, right? So we talk about the white
Mhm.
supremacist
Mhm.
culture, right?
Mhm.
That it's not just white people, but it's this way of being.
Mhm.
And so when that happens,
Mhm.
thinking about these individuals, because they're all over, right? The
Mhm.
workplace bullies are all over. And when they go unchecked, and I did a video about this, when they
Yep.
go unchecked, it's like when those people who are over them don't
Mhm.
check them, they're not weeding those people out, right? So
Right.
now they're destroying the garden,
Right.
right? So we know that when you have something that's dying or
Mhm.
toxic, you destroy everything else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They're gutting their organization out, inside and out, right?
Right.
So there's no recognition of that. So I'm so glad you said that, Charmaine,
And by the
that
way, I don't know if you've
women's
seen it,
HR,
but the workplace bullying report, their last report said that bullying has been on the rise.
wow,
So I think that in 2021, it said 30% of workers claim to be
Yep.
victims of bullying, compared
wow,
to 19% in 2017. And what is more bananas, right, is the fact that people who are remote are being bullied at higher rates. And what's
ooh,
really interesting to me, if we think about the remote lens, is that many people of color, right, especially when remote work started, said
yeah,
that they felt safer, better, more comfortable. I know I certainly did, working remotely,
Me
because
too.
the
yeah,
not dealing with the daily in-person microaggressions and
yeah,
assault that you just deal with
yes,
navigated just from your home to the office and then in the
yeah,
office, was an opportunity to breathe. So the fact
yeah,
that even amidst the rage when the pandemic was, and we're still in a pandemic, raging, that people were saying that, and now we're saying that it's happening more for remote workers. I find it interesting, right? Because I am now saying to myself, well, I don't know if there's a study, but I wonder if specific to BIPOC communities, Black women, if these instances of remote bullying are on the rise now that we've said we feel safer here, right? And I think that's something that I don't know. I'll have to go dig in. I like researching, but that's something that I
yeah,
think is important to know
Absolutely.
too.
Absolutely. And
yeah,
also that bullying culture, particularly here in the world over, bullying was my area of research for my dissertation. And so certainly
mm,
understanding the nuances with bullying and the fact that we still have a lack of understanding about what bullying is.
Right.
It's not
yeah,
a binary, and we often try to put it in a binary.
yeah,
Workplace bullying is very real. And it's
yes,
very
it is.
harmful because it
Mm-hmm,
is bullying that is tied to power structures, which is that system of white
mm-hmm,
supremacy. And I love the fact that you pointed out it's not white people. We're talking about a system. I know people get uncomfortable when you say terms like
Mhm.
white supremacy. It
yeah,
is it's a realized, actualized, theoretical framework for the way that our world works, because it's
yes,
a system of oppression. We're not talking about you as an individual, though all of us have a responsibility to dismantle that system. And those who
mm-hmm,
have more positionality and privilege should be the ones doing that work,
mm-hmm,
and leading that work in collaboration with those who are harmed by that. But it's important to recognize that this is part of the bad behavior being unchecked culture. This
yeah,
is part of the what Charmaine mentioned for that gemisode that was dropped. around, leadership fail statements. When somebody is being told that, yes, we recognize that this person was harmful and that they did things that clearly classify as discriminatory by federal and state definition, but we're not going to fire them. That clearly sends the message that that is okay. And that is also bullying, because ignoring bad behavior and permitting bad behavior is literally fostering bad behavior. And that's a bullying and toxic work culture, which is incredibly harmful, which is why you're seeing the issues of absenteeism, right? Charmaine noticed some really great stats, and I do want to wrap that up as we talk about what Chapter 2 can do to help organizations and teams, is that innovation literally drives business. Teams that are diverse, almost 90% of those decisions that they make are decisions that actually help grow and further the company. Innovation drives creativity. And when we speak about diversity, because Chapter 2 is very intentional that diversity is not skin color and diversity is not the goal. Belonging is where we want to aspire to, and this is a lifelong process. Diversity is not skin color or skin hue. Diversity is age, it is experience, it is culture, it is religion, it is education level and education status, it's social status. It's all the different things that make the rainbow of humanity the most beautiful thing that exists. And it is also knowing that inclusion, when people feel included, your business profits. So if you do not care about people, like many leaders unfortunately don't, we've seen it, we keep seeing it, the dehumanization in the workspace and just firing people, all of it. If you don't care about people, care about your profits. And your profits are impacted because you don't care about your people. So if you actually take the time to invest in your people and to make sure that your space is equitable and understand your market, millennials, Gen X, we want organizations that are diverse. We look up the stats of organizations. I can tell you when I decide to buy something from a company or go with a realtor or whatever it is, I'm looking up your company. If I decide to engage in a business with a company, or even if somebody's seeking me for a job, I look at your company stats. And if I see that your whole team is the same, then that tells me that you do not care about innovation. You do not care about inclusion, and therefore you do not care about me, because I'm innovative. But I desire and require inclusion because that is what's going to drive the creativity and get you to your ROI. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Shar to talk about how we can help, because we're a little bit over time, and what chapters we can do to help people, because we are in the business of people, drive and lead and be successful and thriving in businesses and in organizations, in whatever decisions that they choose to make. Whether they stay or go, Chapter 2 can certainly help you. So Shar, I'm passing it to you.
Dr. K, did you want to say something before I said anything though?
Oh, I just wanted to say, just in terms of what you're talking about, Dr. Claire, in terms of what happens in that bullying culture, I just wanted to just add that, there's a level of vicarious traumatization that happens when people see other people being bullied in the workplace. And they feel that they can't say anything because they feel like they're going to be next, right?
Absolutely.
So
bystander effect, right?
I was literally going to say bystander effect. Yep.
Right. So I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about Chapter 2.
Absolutely.
I'm going to read some of the comments, and then we're going to
Absolutely. So, well, I will say this, and maybe we can do a couple comments, and then I can close out with that so that people, get their responses. When you talked about the inclusion piece, right? And again, for me, the inclusion piece is how do I make sure that the oranges and the apples and the bananas being exposed to each other don't oxidize and get damaged, right? Like, and what do I need to do? Deloitte Australia did a study, and it found, which I thought was interesting, right? So again, for HR leaders, for people, for businesses who might be listening in, they found that inclusive teams outperformed their peer groups by over 80%.
Oh, wow.
So when you think about outperforming somebody by 80%, when you think about the fact that inclusive companies are almost 2 times more likely to be innovative than other leaders in their market, these are things that, again, real impact, right? So as an employee personally, to Claire's point, I'm looking up all these things, because if I don't see that you are being inclusive in your practices, your behaviors, right? And for me, when everything happened, George Floyd, for me, one of the only companies that really stood out to me was Ben and Jerry's, because in my mind, I'm like, they've been about this life for years, even before it was trending.
Yeah.
And they're still about it now that it's not trending.
Yeah.
So that for me was important to acknowledge. And that is something that we're all looking for, right? If I'm looking, and for HR and leaders on the call, if employees too, you should be looking at this. If I'm looking at an organization and seeing that they, one, have no diversity in terms of their leadership ranks, right? That they can't speak to inclusion or what they're doing to foster that, I'm not interested. Because if I understand that innovation and profitability is impacted as a result of a lack of, I don't know that that company is stable enough for me to want to go there. Because if you're not advancing in terms of your innovation or profitability, you may have to cut my job because you don't have the money to pay me at some point.
True.
That's where my brain goes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, do you want to take a question or two, and then I'll?
Oh, I just want to read some of the comments, because I just want
absolutely.
the audience to know that, we're having this conversation, but we also want you to know that we hear you, right? And we really want you to have a voice, right? So even if you're not here right now with us, you are with us, right? So I just want to read your comments. And then I also want to just say, thank you all for tuning in, because I think that the number of Black women who tune in and who comment, that we are seeing that this is happening to so many Black women. And, just overall in the chat, so many people are just saying, thank you for having these conversations, because we don't have a space to talk about it. We just keep working, keep doing, and we're suffering. Okay, so I'm just going to read the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Kamani. I'm so happy about your transition. I am too. I also ordered your book. Thanks for sharing your journey and knowledge. Thank you. We have 311. I also document from home and never talk to anyone on the job. I've seen too many people of color blackballed. Sometimes the manager is the problem and a gaslighter. I can agree to that. The no retaliation is a lie. I've seen it happen to the government, to people of color and Latinos, and to several. They talk about they binge watch. Thank you for watching. Wow, I just experienced some of this myself at a university. Thank you for hosting this important conversation. What if HR and the manager deny that it is happening, but it's definitely a hostile or toxic work environment? I think that's what we talked about. Go to other resources.
Other resources, for sure.
Yes. I'm trying to send a super chat. Oh, that's so sweet. Okay. But you have a question. Okay. What do you do about other Black people in corporate who are afraid of looking like the bad Black and try to sabotage you? They want you to be quiet out of fear.
Listen, fear-based responses are real, all right, and we talked a lot about that on the last in the last session, which focused more specifically on the impacts mentally, emotionally, and even job performance-wise of this happening. And you have a lot of videos specifically to like Black harm, right?
Yes.
Black harm, right? And that's real.
Yes.
So I would say to anyone, find the community that feels honoring to you. Right. So if you're not getting that at work with other people, and look, I experienced that too, right? Being in HR, being the seasons that I was, and being gaslit and discriminated against at an organization where I knew what was happening. And in my mind, I'm thinking, y'all really want to go toe to toe with me? Like, you don't want the smoke, right? That's what's going through my head, right? But they did. And I watched Black people do the side allyship, right? Because they're focused on themselves. Now they're talking about their hair falling out and losing weight and all these health impacts, but for the paycheck, that's what they want. So I think we have to realize and recognize, where's our support coming from? And we have to do a better job of recognizing that while we may prefer that comes from skin folk, that may not always be the case. And how open are you to exploring other avenues, right? Because your greatest supporter, your sponsor, your greatest advocate may be the person who has no relation to you, maybe the person who has no life experience like you. It may be the person who is the opposite of you in every single way. So don't cut yourself off from those experiences. And to the person who mentioned retaliation, absolutely. And, we've acknowledged today and throughout, the other sessions, it absolutely happens. But the thing that we're acknowledging is please ignore the myth when an organization is telling you that it doesn't happen, because it absolutely
True.
does. And
True.
on retaliation, one
Mhm.
of the things, and I didn't mention this, if you're working with HR and you decide to go to HR, ask them, even if you know, and it's in the handbook, what's your policy on retaliation? Now that I've
Ooh,
reported this to you,
I like
I'm
that.
concerned about retaliation. So what
Yes.
would that look like? And what can you assure me of? Because now you're putting them on guard, like, oh crap,
Yes. You're on notice.
you're on
Yeah.
notice, right? So
Yes.
put them in a position to have to explain to you what the organizational procedure would be should you now be retaliated against for reporting it to them. That's a really big tip.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So as we are
Yeah.
closing, can you share with the audience the services that both of you
Absolutely.
offer and how people can contact you both?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I'll do a little bit more about chapter 2. I know at the top I just did a little snippet, but chapter 2 is a consultancy, and we provide advisory, coaching, thought leadership. So exactly what we're doing right now, right? These talks that we're having, and training services to teams and organizations. Well, organizational leaders, right? So it's not the organization. We focus on the organism, not the organization, who are committed to improving business results, driving innovation, and enhancing talent experiences through the lens of conscious inclusion, right? For us, everything is about being consciously inclusive. So the nuts and bolts of that really is, for the organizations on the call, for HR people on the call who might be thinking about, how do I partner? We help solve business problems by first helping you solve your people problems. And we do that through a proprietary solutioning framework that we developed called AJEDI-B, right? And really what AJEDI-B is about is centering the embedment of cognitive, behavioral, and emotional intelligence-based insights into strategy development. And that's where I get to leverage the beautiful brain that is my sister, right? And that's the unique thing about us, right? You have the expertise of someone with 2 decades of global HR business strategy, right? And organizational design, development, and all those fancy words, coupled with the expertise and credentialing of a licensed mental health practitioner. Not that she's showing up in that way, but just having that knowledge base, right? And really understanding human behavior, cognitive development. That's why we're unique, right? So the services, we can consult with you to really understand what's going on in your business, do an assessment. So that's what the advisory portion is going to be. The coaching piece is going to be, we can coach teams, right? So if you're a leader, you're looking to say, how do I help my team develop? We can do team coaching. We can also do leadership coaching for that leader. And by the way, coaching is the only service that we provide that is not B2B. So our services are B2B, which means business to business. We're selling to organizations. But as an individual, if you wanted to get coached by us, you could reach out directly on our website and you can pay directly for that on your own. So we do offer coaching for individuals as well. For training services, we have developed 5 proprietary trainings based on our framework that we developed. And we're also authorized partners for DIS and Predictive Index, which are, people have heard of Strength Fighters, DIS, Predictive Index, all these different things, but really assessments, workplace and style assessments. So we're authorized partners for that. And again, the thought leadership pieces, sitting down and having these conversations and getting real and teaching organization leaders and employees what they should expect and how they can show it better.
Awesome. And so I'll put that information in the description
Yep.
section of the YouTube channel, okay?
Yep.
And then Dr. Claire, what about Dr. Claire Speaks?
Thank you so much. So as I shared earlier, Dr. Claire Speaks is a training speaking consultancy that also has thought leadership consultancy, and really focusing on the intersection of mental health, racial and social justice, and advocacy and policy. It is firmly rooted in DEIJ and with the umbrella of health equity. And in that space, I really work with organizations that are particularly in a certain segment: healthcare education organizations, government, and for-profit or nonprofit organizations that are working with people, and particularly the people and the communities that they are serving, to help them serve better. And through chapter 2, sometimes people may reach out and it's a blur. And so we determine by connecting with each other, hey, is this something that fits under chapter 2, or is this something that may fit under Dr. Claire Speaks? But really, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today fits under chapter 2, because we're talking about the talent experience, and we're talking about how organizations can really work to move the needle towards progress. There is no, we talk about Maslow hierarchies of need in clinical work. I don't believe personally we ever arrive. We are constantly changing and growing. But the focus of chapter 2 is to keep moving forward, is to acknowledge where you are and decide if you want to stay there. And if you want to stay there, it's fine. Because I want to be clear, Shar and I are spirit-led women, and we're also women that say we choose if we want to work with an organization or not. Because if
Absolutely.
it doesn't align with our values,
Mhm.
if we can sense that you're gaslighting and you're really just trying to check a box by saying we got these two amazing Black women, we're not going to choose to work with you.
And we have turned down.
We have turned down business
Absolutely.
because it's not aligned with our values, and it's been clear to us that these organizations and people that are behind these organizations were not about the business.
And we won't contribute to harm.
We will not
absolutely
contribute
not
to
contribute
harm
to harm
of others, and we certainly will not contribute to harm of ourselves. And so when we operate in integrity. Yes, business is important to us, but wellness is so deeply rooted into chapter 2 that there is no way we would engage in things that are not honoring and engaging for us, and as well as the people that we are serving. So I want to be very clear with you that is the mission of chapter 2, and that is the way that, again, chapter2.com, you can reach out and find us. There's amazing insights there. One of the things that I wanted to mention as we go, there's a lot of amazing blogs on chapter 2, which are insights. And, there's insights from November, I believe, that speak about resilience. And it connects the mental health piece, because often people say about being resilient in workplaces, and we have found that is incredibly toxic.
It's flawed.
The
gemasodes. So gemasodes are anything that are episodic for us. So there's going to be more than one part to it. And if it's a gem, that's just a standalone essay. And that essay is entitled "The Fundamental Flaw of Resilience," because who are we asking resilience from? And usually those are people who look like us. And there's no grace in that. So chapter2.com.
Being harmed, right?
Yes.
It's like the people are being harmed. And so it focuses on the individual and not looking at the toxic system.
Absolutely.
So let's focus on how you cope better and how you're resilient.
Yes. And I'm using that example to say, definitely go to chapter2.com, because in addition to that essay about resilience, which definitely connects to some of the things we've talked about here, there are a host of other resources and other gemasodes or blogs that you will be able to read that actually provide information. Shar and I are both nerds who love heels and jewelry. And so everything we are saying is also backed by embedded with links, external links, because we're going to back it up. We're going to back it up like Beyonce says, back it up. We're going to back it up, and we're going to have those receipts. And so we also will link to external resources. So if you want to read those episodes and you want to read some of those blogs, you also are now being linked to some substantial information and research that is supporting and influencing how we're presenting that information.
Absolutely.
And
that's
so
what we're going to work with.
Read it. Also sign up. Once you sign up to be on the
mailing list,
you will get a guide from Angst to Anchored, which is really helpful. And the AJEDI-B framework is really one, because the A is accessibility, right? So accessibility, justice, empathy, going down the list. But the reality is that for us, all of that is necessary to get to the place that we want to be, which is an organization that's anchored and an organization that is caring about optimizing their talent and their people. Because without your people, you don't have a company. We're about the longevity and sustainability of companies. And in order to be a sustainable company, you have to invest in the people that make your company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So chapter2.com, and also our email. So you can contact us on our contact page there. And also our email is info@chapter2.com. I know that Dr. K will link it, but just so anyone knows. But thank you.
Yeah. So I just want to say thank you to these brilliant women, brilliant, passionate women who speak truth to power and really can help transform organizations. So please check them out. As again, I'll have their information in the description section of my YouTube channel. And also, I just want to say, if you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, Lifting Us with Climb Consulting Wellness Services, please do so now. Please share this video and other videos with other Black women so we know that we're not alone, so we feel empowered. Hopefully you're leaving this video knowing, if you choose to go to HR or not, but at least you have the strategy so that you know what to do. Okay. And I also want to share with the audience in closing that I do have a Black Women Healing from Toxic Jobs coaching program. If you would like to be a part of or considered for the next cohort, I will put that information in the description section as well. And then I'll have a free 1-hour training for Black women, just give you a little bit of nuggets about what to do with leaving a toxic job. So I'll put that in the description section as well for you to get on the waiting list. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Know that you are not alone. Know that you have options. You have options. You do not have to stay, as we talked about before. You can leave. That could be one of the options.
You
okay?
deserve better.
You deserve better.
You deserve
absolutely
freedom. You
do.
deserve peace. You deserve joy. You deserve rest. You
Yes.
deserve it. You have earned it, and you don't have
Yes.
to prove it to anyone.
Yes, and our ancestors have paid for it, right? And I was thinking about what Dr. Clara said about Beyonce. Back it up. I want to add another thing with Beyonce. If you are at a job and you feel like it's breaking your soul, no, that's not the place for you. Okay. If you are feeling that you need to be somewhere where you are being affirmed and respected and valued for your worth, because you are a gift. Okay.
Beyonce is a theme. The essay we posted yesterday, we referenced Beyonce. So if you go to our website, you'll see the blog post from yesterday is talking about whether or not organizations are actually optimized for employee engagement. And we talk about Beyonce. So Beyonce has on this call.
Queen has to be mentioned. The Queen must be mentioned. So absolutely.
Yes. Stand in your power. Stand in your power. Okay. Okay, everyone. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Ladies, if you can stay on for 1 minute.
Absolutely.
Have a
good night,
Bye, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye.